So on Monday of this week, we received from a source a collection of confidential documents related to the Biden family. We believe those documents are authentic, they're real, and they're damning. At the time we received them, my executive producer, Justin Wells, and I were in Los Angeles preparing to interview Tony Bobolinsky about the Biden's business dealings in China, Ukraine, and other countries. So we texted a producer in New York and we asked him to send those documents to us in LA, and he did that. So Monday afternoon of this week, he shipped those documents overnight to California with a large national carrier, a brand name company that we've used, you've used countless times with never a single problem. But the Biden documents never arrived in Los Angeles. Tuesday morning, we received word from the shipping company that our package had been opened and the contents were missing. The documents had disappeared. As of tonight, the company has no idea and no working theory even about what happened to this trove of materials, documents that are directly relevant to the presidential campaign just 6 days from now.
The three witnesses we have before this committee today collectively pose, I believe, the single greatest threat to free speech in America and the greatest threat we have to free and fair elections. I think Google has more power than any company on the face of the planet. But today, I want to focus my questioning on Mr. Dorsey and on Twitter. Because of the three players before us, I think Twitter's conduct has by far been the most egregious. Mr. Dorsey, does Twitter have the ability to influence elections?
No.
You don't believe Twitter has any ability to influence elections?
No, we are one part of a broad spectrum of communication channels that people have.
So you're testifying to this committee right now that Twitter, when it silences people, when it censors people, when it blocks political speech, that has no impact on elections?
People have choice of other communication channels with which...
Not if they don't hear information. If you don't think you have the power to influence elections, why do you block anything?
Well, we have policies that are focused on making sure that more voices on the platform are possible. We see a lot of abuse and harassment, which ends up silencing people and having them leave from the platform.
All right, Mr. Dorsey, I find your opening questions, your opening answers absurd on their face. Mr. Dorsey, who the hell elected you and put you in charge of what the media are allowed to report and what the American people are allowed to hear? And why do you persist in behaving as a Democratic super PAC, silencing views to the contrary of your political beliefs?
In my simple opinion, the future of America rides on the decision you're going to make on November 3rd. And if you choose Joe Biden, we become a country that will be guided by socialism, authoritarianism, the kind of censorship you're living through right now by big tech, big media, and big businesses who are controlled or feel they're controlled by the Chinese market. The reality is I'm the same Rudy Giuliani that put the mafia in jail, the Colombian drug dealers, both of whom threatened to kill me a number of times, Wall Street, numerous corrupt politicians, both on the federal and state and city level, Republican and Democrat. Many of them far smarter than the Bidens, who do have an intellectual defect. But you are captured now. You're conned and captured by a small group, but very influential group, of true, absolute criminals who have sold out this country for money, for power, for greed, maybe even for other things. So let me tell you about the Biden crime family. The Biden family case is a quintessential racketeering case. And if I were to do it as a racketeering case, I'd go back 30 years. And I'd show all of the corruption that was involved when Joe became a senator and his brother Jim became a crooked lobbyist, and they were doing deals for a couple of thousand, 10,000, 50, and then his son got a job for a big bank in Delaware, and Joe all of a sudden became the biggest banking lobbyist, and he lobbied against he was the only Democrat who lobbied against the bankruptcy bill because the bank had Hunter in a no-show job. Very similar to Ukraine. But I'm going to confine this to the four, if not most recent, the four that are the easiest to cover. Let's simplify Ukraine. Ukraine Hunter Biden, fresh out of being tossed out of the Navy for drug addiction, is hired by the crookedest man in Ukraine in order to get his father, then Vice President Biden, and the point man for the Ukraine, handing out all the money in the Ukraine. The point of that $8 to $14 million is not to hire an unfortunate drug addict who never shows up in Ukraine in 6 years. It's to get Joe's office and to use it for a specific purpose. And the specific purpose is to get the case against Burisma, which is the crooked company that Hunter goes to work for, owned by Mykola Zlochevsky, to get that case dismissed. So Mykola Zlochevsky can come back from exile and he can keep the $5.4 billion that he stole from Ukraine. I know this is hard to believe because we're good people and we don't believe that crooked politicians do this, but the Bidens have been doing this all their lives and this was a big score for them. And that is why Joe Biden had the prosecutor fired. Joe was dealing with the big crooks in Ukraine. Mr. Poroshenko, the president of the Ukraine, alleged to have stolen $7 to $8 billion. Good friend of Joe's, good friend of the ambassador. And he made a big, big score on dismissing the Burisma case. The Bidens got the 9 to 14 million. The Ukrainians are now investigating their ex-president for taking $100 million to dismiss this case against one of the richest men in Ukraine, who now has been allowed to come back from the Ukraine, kept his $5.4 billion, keeps his crooked company, and continues to go on to steal in the Ukraine, thanks to our vice president, Joseph Biden, whose Biden crime family enriched themselves to the tune of 8 to 14 million. Then we have Iraq. Joe was appointed to negotiate a status of forces agreement in Iraq. Joe does what he always does when he has to negotiate. He fails. I used to think it was out of stupidity. Well, now I find that his brother James, a man who has no experience in housing, is just at the very same time cut into a $1.5 billion housing contract in Iraq. James is cut in. Joe loses to Iraq. You got the same pattern here, right? Joe loses in Ukraine. Family comes away with 14 million. Joe loses in Iraq. James comes away with 1/3 of a $1.5 billion contract. Now we switch over to Russia for a quick one. $3.5 million from the widow of the mayor of Moscow, Elena Buturina, to Hunter Biden. Additional little payments amounting to about a total of $4 million to Hunter Biden. No explanation. I do not think Elena Buturina is paying $3.5 to $4 million to Hunter Biden. What do you think? Well, when you go through the documents and you go through the witnesses now available and you go through the hard drive, this was the beginnings of setting up a money laundering operation. Elena Buturina is the richest woman in Russia. She is a close ally of Vladimir Putin. She helped to depose her husband as mayor of Moscow. And she, like the other two we're talking about, is a very dangerous woman. However, there's a flow of $4 million right into the Biden crime family. Well, in any event, we get to China. Let's separate these two deals because in the slight descriptions you've gotten that have leaked out beyond the Iron Curtain, you've been kind of confused. They're both equally incriminating. The first one happens when he's vice president. Joe takes Hunter with him on Air Force Two to China. Joe is going there as a point man, which is when Joe always makes money when he's a point man, as a point man for Barack Obama. And his job is to get China out of the islands they had recently militarized that they dispute with Japan. And secondly, to get tariffs, oppressive tariffs, reduced. Remember, high tariffs cost you your jobs. So this is no joking matter. So Joe negotiates for 8 days. We don't know what Hunter does for 8 days. We do know that when they get home, Joe is a failure. The newspapers of the day say that Joe was unable to achieve either objective. And then within a short period of time, it gets even worse because China increases the militarization of disputed islands. and it raises the tariffs even further. Here's what happens. He doesn't just lose you your job, he gets paid for it. Because 8 days after they return from China, a letter arrives. And the letter is from the Bank of China to Hunter Biden and Hunter Biden's corrupt, stupid, ridiculous private equity fund for a $1 billion commitment. Goldman Sachs doesn't get commitments like this without massive due diligence. Massive due diligence would reveal, actually a little bit of due diligence would reveal that this stupid, crooked private equity fund is made up of the following partners. Hunter Biden, son of the vice president. Chris Hines, stepson of the Secretary of State. James Bulger, the nephew of Whitey Bulger and head of the Thornhill Corporation. Whitey Bulger, one of the most notorious organized criminals and murderers in the United States. And fourth, the Bank of China. So the vice president's son and the Secretary of State's stepson, at a time of great sensitivity for the national interest of the United States with China, is in a $1 billion partnership with the government of China, and you are not told about it. Does Barack Obama know about it? If he doesn't, was he sleeping through that like he slept through Benghazi? Or is he responsible for enabling this corruption, similar to the way he was in enabling the corruption of the crooked Clintons and the fix of the Clinton case? Big question, necessary to answer. And it's got to get beyond the Iron Curtain, because they cover up, the Iron Curtain does, the massive corruption of the Obama administration, and it goes way beyond Biden. And that's why they're fighting so hard to cover this up. Well, in any event, it gets worse. China then sends another $500 million to this completely corrupt, totally stupid private equity fund. And I'll include John Kerry in that. So, how did this not get disclosed if it isn't hidden? How does our American intelligence services, how do they not know about it? How does John Kerry not know about it and report it? How? Because the Obama administration is thoroughly corrupt. And the media that covers them is either so politically zealous and crazy and insane, or corrupt. Remember, some of the media is owned by the big tech that makes a fortune in China. Despite this, we never find out about it until it's revealed by Peter Schweiker in his book, Secret Empires. And when it's revealed, the Iron Curtain makes sure that you don't find out about it. Given no publicity, no attention. This is a startling revelation. And now we get to the most recent one, the one that is disclosed. Well, all of these, by the way, are completely corroborated by the hard drive, the 40 or 50,000 text messages and emails and photographs that were recovered from Hunter Biden's repairman. It is Hunter Biden's hard drive. No point in my spending any time on that. That is such a stupid allegation that it's Russian, or it's been corroborated now by independent witnesses, by technical experts, by the FBI, by other police organizations. Now we get to maybe the most troubling of all. This is a deal made in anticipation of Joe Biden becoming president. And it's a deal that's made with several high-level members of the Communist Party. So we have to understand who they are. And the name of the corporation is CEFC. It's a Chinese company that engages in energy, but looks more like it's a front for intelligence activities. It's run by a man named Xi Jinping. His American operative is Patrick Ho, and his second American operative is Gongwan Deng, who's referred to as Kevin Deng. They're on one side. They negotiate a deal, and I have all the papers for the negotiation They'll be on my website. You can examine them. There's one very, very good one, and I'll explain it to you. So the Chinese communists are going to pay the Biden family, and the people disclosed here of the Biden family are Hunter Biden, James Biden, and Sarah Biden. That's son, brother, sister-in-law. Jin Wenming is going to put in $10 million per year for a total of $30 million. And then everyone earns, including the Bidens, 50% on the equity after that. So it's $10 million for sure for the crooked Bidens, and then 50% more depending on success. What are the crooked Bidens supposed to do for this? They're supposed to make introductions. Make introductions for $10 million a year. And then you got all the back and forth. Actually, Hunter is negotiating for more. It begins at $30 million a year. They add the 50% equity. Then he wants even more. They turn that down, and finally we get a contract. But we don't just get a contract. We get a contract, and then if you search a little bit more in the hard drive, you come up with a hidden term sheet. The hidden term sheet has all the equities laid out. They seem a little different, and then when you get to the end, you see they left over 10%. And it says 10% to H boop, boop, for the big guy. Now, who's the big guy? Oh, I'll make it easy. If you look at another 3 or 4 texts, you see throughout, Hunter Biden refers to his father as the big guy. In other words, one friend saw his father at a political gathering at the Leipzig club, and there is a text, I just saw the big guy at the Leipzig club. And then you see, right below it, Vice President Biden addressed people at the Leipzig club. Then in another you say, should we give this information to the big guy? And then in another, we have a memo that says to the participants in it who are not Biden's, please do not, make sure you do not use the name Joe Biden ever. In other words, we're going to conceal the fact that Joe Biden is involved in it. You put this all together, and you put together the testimony now under oath of Mr. Bablinski, and what you have is Joe Biden is getting 10% of the money from communist China, 10%. And now if you want the overarching scheme that ties together all 30 years of this, let's call it the kill shot, a piece of evidence that every prosecutor dreams of. This is a text message from Hunter Biden to his daughter as she is taking on some of the responsibilities in the family. And here's what the text message reads. I love all of you, but I don't receive any respect. And that's fine, I guess. Works for you, apparently. I hope you all can do what I did and pay for everything for this entire family for 30 years. It's really hard, but don't worry. Unlike Pop, I won't make you give me half your salary. Key facts. Pays for everything for 30 years, precisely the number I used a year and a half ago for the duration of the Biden crime family. And not only does he take care of expenses, including, for example, his half-sister's tuition forever, but he gives half the salary to Pop. Pop is another name for Joe Biden, AKA Big Guy, AKA Pop, AKA Crook. You need more? That's why they invested this money. He's been getting this money for years. That's why people have for years said, how can Joe Biden only make the salary of a senator with a wife who's a teacher and have five homes and live like a billionaire? This is why. Because the money going to Hunter Biden goes to Joe Biden. Now, doesn't that make sense? Hunter Biden has been a drug addict for all of these 30 years. Nobody's paying him this money. And everybody knows he's a drug addict. And all the photographs that I have of him being a drug addict, and all the inappropriate photographs I have of him that he describes as being very unsafe for children, he, Hunter describes the photographs as being very unsafe for children. That's another email right here, just in case you think this is me, this is Hunter, and this is very serious. He says, he's talking about his sister-in-law, who was his lover. She told my therapist that I was sexually inappropriate with a 14-year-old girl when she says that I FaceTime naked with her. And the reason I can't have her out to see me is because I'll walk around naked, smoking crack, talking tom girls on FaceTime. When she was pressed, she said that I never said anything like that. But the bottom line is that I created a very unsafe environment for the kids. There are numerous text messages, emails, and photographs that support that. I brought this to the Delaware police within 4 days of seeing it. Joe Biden's been sitting on it for 3 years, so I conclude with the following observation. You may feel sorry for Hunter Biden. I do. I say, 30, 40 years ago, if that were my son and he were a drug addict, I'd get him treatment. I'd never put him in this kind of business. And of course, law enforcement does nothing with it but cover it up. Law enforcement has covered all of this up. So here's what emerges in the end. You're the only ones who can save this country. I can't save this country. I've done everything I can. And this low-level trash isn't going to stop me, because that's what they are, who somehow got near the White House. But don't let them get the White House. American people have common sense and decency. You got to stop these people. You got to get out and vote. You vote. You vote them down. You get them out, and I promise you that I will expend as much effort to clean this up so we no longer have censorship. And so we get these crooked politicians out of Washington, Republican or Democrat. There's just a few of them. They go back to the Clinton era. It's not just Democrats. It's mostly Democrats, but it's not just Democrats. Let's get rid of them all. Let's really drain the swamp this time. Really drain it. Now that we know what it really is, I never thought it was this bad. I thank you very, very much for your attention.